Good evening, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California. I'm Jack Cordes, President of Mellon Private Wealth Management of Northern California and the Commonwealth Club's quarterly chair. It is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Vincent Bugliosi, prominent criminal trial attorney, author of the famed Helter Skelter, and his new book, Reclaiming History, The Assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
My name is Joe Epstein. I'm a past president of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors, and I will be conducting the question and answer portion of today's program. We do have a large number of questions, but first I want to just remind those who have just tuned in to the radio. You're listening to the Commonwealth Club of California radio program. And our guest tonight is Vincent Bugliosi, who is discussing his new work, which delves into the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And the name of the book Mr. Bugliosi wrote is Reclaiming History. So as I said, we have a lot of questions, and it's not going to be my job or the job of the audience for sure to disprove any of the claims that you have made about there is no conspiracy here. But there are some interesting questions, and I'd like to start off with the following question. First, let me just say that the House of Representatives had a select committee on assassinations, and that was formed in 1978. And they concluded that John F. Kennedy was probably killed as a product of a plot. So could you please tell us why you favored the British Forensic Society's study, which challenged the four-shot or two-shot gunman theory, over the National Research Council study, which was the one used by our Congress?
What were the last words? The National Research Council what?
The National Research Council did a study which was used by our House of Representatives, Select Committee on Assassination.
Okay, whoever asked that question has it wrong. The National Research Council actually overruled the House Select Committee. Okay, what the question pertains to, and it's certainly a very valid question, the House Select Committee in late 1978 prepared a draft. That draft is not out there too much, but I got a copy of it from the National Archives, and they had concluded, this is the House Select Committee, had concluded in this draft, which was about to be typed up into its final form, that there was no conspiracy in the assassination. So their findings were identical to the Warren Commission. And at the last second, 11th hour, the House Select Committee has sold a bill of goods by two acoustic experts from Queens College who said that listening to a police dictabelt from the Dallas Police Headquarters, they could hear they called them impulse sounds, which they interpreted as being the sound of bullets being fired, and that these sounds, they presumed, were coming from a motorcycle with a stuck microphone in Dealey Plaza. That was their conclusion. And since the HSCA had already said that Oswald only fired 3 rounds, and there's 4 impulse sounds, and these two acoustics experts said they're all bullets, all 4, that would mean what? A second gunman from the grassy knoll. Now, what happened thereafter is the National Academy of Science. So they were, whoever asked that question has got it backward. The National Academy of Sciences in 1982, 4 years later, re-examined that police dictabelt, and they heard those same 4 impulse sounds. But the problem was that in the background, they heard, at the very time of these 4 impulse sounds, the voice of Dallas Sheriff Bill Decker giving instructions to his troops. And that, unfortunately for the conspiracy theorists, was 1 minute after the shooting in Dealey Plaza, when the limousine was long gone down the Stemmons Freeway on the way to Parkland Hospital. Responsible conspiracy theorists, assuming that's not an oxymoron, no longer cite the HSCA's thing. By the way, it was a hotly divided House, too. It was not a unanimous vote, heavy division. Spence in London didn't even raise that issue, and he's certainly trying to create a reasonable doubt, and he didn't even raise the issue because he knew that I could shoot it down immediately. So that's been shot down. They're still hanging on to it, but there's no question that it was 1 minute after the shooting in Dealey Plaza? But that's a very good question.
Thank you.
I hope you don't have any more good ones for me like that. I want easy ones.
I think we have lots of good questions here, and you just mentioned Parkland Hospital, and there obviously was a lot of science that the Warren Commission used to draw its conclusions, and I'm sure you read all of the science that there was to read. So here's a question from the audience. Sir, did you talk to any of the doctors at Parkland Hospital? Obviously, to determine what the forensic results were, the direction of the bullet, front or behind, as you just described, etc.
Yeah, I spoke to several. The main one was Dr. Carrico, who's now dead, but he was the first doctor who attended to the president. And the conspiracy theorists, not using good common sense, they've relied on the observations of these Parkland doctors, many of whom thought that there was an entrance wound in the front of the president's throat. Now, if a bullet passes through soft tissue, then the exit wound is going to be very similar to the entrance wound. It's when it goes and hits a bone or whatever it is that the exit wound is going to be larger and jagged. But the point is, which they never mention, the conspiracy theorists, they never mention that the Parkland doctors were only there for one purpose. Number one, none of them were pathologists. But number two, the most important point, is that they were there to save the president's life. It was a frantic, frantic situation. No one is looking at the wounds to decide which is an entrance and which is an exit wound. And then they also lie and they say that the president never had any entrance wound to the back of his body. See, the first shot that hit the president was in the upper right back, and it exited the front of his throat. But they don't tell you that the Parkland doctors never turned the body over. They weren't trying to find out where he was shot from or anything. That wasn't their job. That was later in the evening with the pathologists who closely examined the wounds, took x-rays, etc. So the Parkland doctors have been utilized by the conspiracy theorists because many of them were making statements about what they thought they saw, and it was a frantic situation. No one there, and they've said this, they testified under oath, was trying to determine the direction of the fire or anything like that. But at night, when they had the autopsy, it was at that point that they determined how many entrance wounds and what direction the bullets were coming in, etc.
Mr. Bugliosi, you did spend some time in your prepared remarks about the single bullet theory, or the magic bullet theory, as some have called it. But you didn't address whether or not, as this questioner alludes to, do you think the bullet or bullets could have been aimed primarily at Governor Connally as opposed to the president?
Well, I mean, it could have, but there's no evidence of that. If they wanted to hit Connally, it would be a little more difficult because Kennedy was seated not directly in front of Connally, but certainly most of Connally's body was blocked off by Kennedy. But Oswald wasn't thinking small potatoes. I mean, the governor, come on, that's small potatoes. Oswald was the type of guy that was thinking of changing the course of history. And like Governor Connally has said, if he was after me, he said, I didn't even have a bodyguard. I was all over Texas, campaigning and everything. If he wanted to kill me, he could have done it very, very easily. He wouldn't have done it in Dealey Plaza. So, I mean, I've heard that before. I've heard all of these things before, although a couple of days ago I heard something I had never heard before. Someone called in and said, was Lady Bird behind the assassination? I don't know if you know Lady Bird. I said, God, I said, I said, I have to say, I've done 20 years of work on it. I've never heard that allegation. I've heard of LBJ. I have a whole chapter on it. I said, Lady Bird? Well, why do you think that she may have been? Oh, she wanted to be First Lady, and unbelievable.
I had mentioned to you prior to the program that I contacted a personal friend of mine. He happened to have been on staff of the Warren Commission at the time. And I said, geez, I'm going to do this very interesting Q&A moderation tonight. Do you have any suggestions, any ideas? He said, yeah.
This is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a tough one that I can't answer.
Ask Mr. Bugliosi if the Warren Commission possibly had a rush to judgment due to the pressure from President Lyndon Johnson. He wanted the report out, he wanted a conclusion, and he thought it would be to his advantage to finish and publish this report before the elections of 1964.
Well, no one knows the answer to that question except that there's no evidence to support what he's implying. Now, he worked for the Warren Commission, this fellow?
That's correct.
What's his name?
I probably shouldn't
Oh, okay. All right.
say.
All right. Well, there's been much
He was an
written
attorney
on
for
it,
them.
and Earl Warren was a very honorable man, and he said more than once, and several have said, that LBJ put absolutely no pressure on me or anyone to finish this investigation within any period of time. It was just open. And as far as rushed, come on, it was over 9 months. That's not rushed. They had the FBI working for them, and all types of groups, the Secret Service. I told you the FBI alone conducted 25,000 interviews. So what he's saying there could be true. There may have been things going on in the minds of these people, but there's no evidence to support this. There is evidence in the form of statements, you know, that there was no rush whatsoever.
Well, as long as you've mentioned the FBI, let's talk a little bit about the CIA and the FBI. Here we are 43 years later. The question is, if the CIA can bungle the intelligence which this administration says that they relied on to justify an attack on Iraq, isn't it possible that you have placed too much credibility on discounting their involvement, as they've stated, in the Kennedy assassination? And how about the credibility of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI?
Okay, now you're asking me two questions from the same person. Is that fair to the many? I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying there's many people that have questions.
Well,
and you're asking two for one person. I can
please.
answer both if you want me to. He wants me to talk about you want me to talk about the CIA and the FBI?
Yes.
Well, you know, I already did when I said that there was no group behind this killing. That includes the FBI, CIA, KGB, Secret Service, and if there was a group, okay, if there was a group that got Oswald to kill 4 of them, I don't care if it's the CIA or the mob, when he left that building, there would have been a car waiting for him. And that answers the CIA and FBI question. But specifically about the CIA, you know who the head of the CIA was? John McCone. He was a friend of the Kennedys. He was a friend of... Kennedy appointed John McCone CIA director, and maybe John got upset. Maybe that JFK didn't invite him one night to a party. I'm going to kill him, you know. Well, you know, here's the thing. And the FBI. You know what the theory about the FBI is? Here's the theory about the FBI. Hoover was about to retire. Mandatory age, I think, was 70. And he was going to retire in 65, and he didn't think that Kennedy was going to waive the mandatory requirement thing, so he killed him. Apparently, you see, the main, let me explain this to you. The main reason why well-intentioned people, like many of you folks, believe in a conspiracy in this case, the main mistake that they make, and the main argument that conspiracy theorists make in supporting their argument that there's a conspiracy is that such and such a group had a motive and therefore must have committed the murder. The CIA killed Kennedy. Why? Well, they thought he was soft on communism. The mob killed him. Why? Well, because Bobby was going after them, the Attorney General, with a missionary zeal. They wanted to get Bobby off their back. The military-industrial complex killed Kennedy because he wanted to withdraw troops from Vietnam and they wanted a war. Now let's stop to think about that, this sublime silliness. Apparently in our society, if a president is pursuing policies that a particular group, like the military or Wall Street or the unions or environmentalists don't like, well, the group simply kills them. Right? That's supposed to be funny, and you don't think it's funny. The group simply kills him. If you don't like what he's doing, we just kill him. That's what we routinely do in our society, right? If the president's doing something you don't like, well, we kill him. And basically, that's at the heart of this whole thing. So, such and such a group had a motive. Some of them go further and say, oh, no, wait a minute, Mr. Bugliosi, there's a lot more than motive. A lot. I said, what? They said, oh, it means an opportunity. You're a prosecutor. You don't know about that? I said, well, I've heard the term, but I said, when I used to prosecute, I never heard anyone use those words. Let me tell you how silly that is. Motive means an opportunity. Have you heard that term? You haven't. You have. Okay. But you didn't think what I said was funny, did you, before? Now you do. Motive. Kennedy comes into Dallas. He says, we're coming into nut country, because I was very, very conservative down there. A lot of people didn't like him because of his civil rights bills. So they had a motive to kill him, right? If you don't like someone, you kill him. Means. All they have to do is buy a weapon, right? And they got the means, right? Opportunity. Well, all they have to do is go on the motorcade route. Motive means an opportunity. How much does it mean? I can see a courtroom wag say, okay, 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 okay. The defendant had motive, means, and opportunity. But did he do it? Did he do it? Somewhere along the line, you have to pay the piper and come up with evidence. And yet, book after book on the assassination comes out. They spend 300, 400, 500, 600 pages establishing motive, and they think they're home free. If they've established the motive, that must mean that the person with the motive committed the murder. And that's just childlike non sequitur. This silly Oliver Stone came up with 10 groups that had a motive, and he had all 10 groups involved in the assassination, with his thinking cap turned very, very tightly to the off position. Oliver said they all had a motive, so therefore they all killed him. I don't know where they met, Madison Square Garden. He's not going to like me, by the way, but he's just unbelievable, this guy, Stone. The stratospheric arrogance of this guy. I mean, look, I don't think you should fictionalize history, period. But if you do, you got to call it fiction, right? But he fictionalized history, and he wants people to believe that what he was saying was the truth, and he's on record saying he wanted his movie to replace the Warren Report. Can you imagine that? Unbelievable.
For those of you just tuning in to our program, this is the Commonwealth Club of California radio program with Vincent Bugliosi, who is discussing his new work, which delves into the JFK assassination, and the name of the book, Reclaiming History. Mr. Bugliosi, we talked about the magic bullet. I want to go back to the bullet.
Back to the bullet.
Right. There is a theory called the fragment theory. The bullet apparently hit bone more than once and emerged, I think, relatively unscathed.
Yes, okay. When I was talking about the magic bullet, really there are two aspects to it, and I was talking about the main aspect, but that is an important one too, a very, very important one. It's called the pristine bullet, CE 399, Commission Exhibit 399, and that's part of the magic bullet thing. And the argument is, how could this bullet pass through Kennedy's body and Connolly's body and come out pristine? Well, they're lying again. I guess pristine, I haven't looked it up, but I think pristine means in its original condition, perfect. And they're lying, because it's not a pristine bullet. If you look at their books, they show the side of the bullet. They never show the base of the bullet, which is shown in Reclaiming History. The base of the bullet is very badly damaged. It's not a pristine bullet. And there's also a slight curvature to that bullet. The bullet, I think, weighed 161 grains, and its present weight is, I think, 158.4 grains, so it's lost 2.6 grains. It's not a pristine bullet. Also, this bullet was a fully metal-jacketed military-type bullet designed to cause a lot of damage to objects it hits without doing too much damage to itself. And firearms experts, Joe, from the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee, both concluded that CE 399 could have caused the damage it did. Well, Kennedy had passed through soft tissue. Could have caused the damage it did without being deformed more than it was. This was a military-type bullet, heavily jacketed. Well, the base was not fully jacketed, but everything else, including the nose, was metal jacketed.
Well, Abraham Zapruder, just to give you a clue where I'm going next.
Well, what you should be telling me is he was a part of the conspiracy. That's what they're saying now.
Well, yes.
Are you going to say that?
It's also been called by some as his videos, the most significant amateur recording of a historical event. How convincing was the Zapruder home video of the assassination of JFK? And was the film tampered with? Did it reinforce your theory of upholding the findings of the Warren Commission, the fact that it was apparently tampered?
These goofy conspiracy theorists are now claiming that Zapruder was a part of the conspiracy, and also that the film itself was a complete hoax. I don't know if you know that. There's books coming out that the whole film is a hoax. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's just so silly. It's a very good film. It's the only film of the entire assassination. No one has ever shown that it was tampered with in any way, but they're alleging that. I don't know what I can tell you. They're alleging that, but there's no evidence that that film was tampered with in any way. By the way, it would be very, very dangerous to try to tamper with the Zapruder film. Why? Because there were other films, right? And other photographs. So if you tamper with it, don't you have to tamper with every other photograph and film in Dealey Plaza? Because if you tamper with it and it doesn't match up with another film, then you know that the original film has been tampered with. And it's totally consistent with all the other films in Dealey Plaza. But it was the only one that was captured the entire assassination. The thing that surprises me, really, is that how he could be looking through that. I don't take photographs. I don't have a cell phone. I'm just a spastic, so I don't even. I may have taken one photograph in my life, but I think they call it a view finder. How he's looking through that viewfinder and sees the president's head exploding in front of him, and he was crying, and still he kept it up there. He kept it up there. He didn't, he kept it up there, and he captured the entire assassination scene. That film originally was sold to Life magazine, I think, for $150,000, and then Life magazine gave it back to the Zapruder family for only $1, and then the family sold it to the federal government for, I think, around $18 million.
Wow. Well, as an attorney, as a prosecutor, former prosecutor, you're well aware of the comparison of evidence versus proof.
Right.
Can you compare your finding, and I want to get to this question before the evening is over because we only have about 5 or 6 minutes to go, but can you compare your findings of guilt or innocence, or simply your belief in your own conclusions, by comparing your research on the Charles Manson case, that was your book, Helter Skelter, the O.J. Simpson case, you wrote a book called Outrage, and of course, the conclusions that you have made about the Warren Commission in this current book we're discussing tonight, Reclaiming History.
What's it? You want me to compare the Manson case with the Simpson case with the Kennedy case?
Well, your findings in the case.
Yeah. Well, I'm positive about all three. I mean, no, I am. I don't know what to say to you. I'm positive that Manson was guilty, even though he was not at the scene. I brought him in by way of circumstantial evidence. And when the words helter skelter were found printed in blood, these were his words, this was his philosophy. I argued to the jury that this was tantamount to his fingerprints being found at the murder scene, and he completely dominated his family. They wouldn't do anything without his telling them what to do. At night, they'd sit around the campfire, and he'd sit on a big rock and play the guitar and philosophize on life. No one else would talk unless he spoke to them first. And I argued to the jury that these people were so totally subservient to him that it's just inconceivable that they would have gone out on their own and committed some of the most horrendous murders imaginable without his direction and guidance. Simpson, I mean, come on. I didn't even want to write a book on that one because it's so obvious, but my editor asked me to, and I'm glad I did. It got up to #1 in the country. But if I was just telling someone recently, because they were saying, well, they think that Simpson was innocent. I said, let me tell you something. If Simpson is innocent, then these two people are still alive, okay? I mean, his blood's, come on, it's fresh bloods at the murder scene, okay? It's fresh bloods at the murder scene, the victim's blood inside his car and home. To deny guilt under those circumstances is the equivalent of a man being caught in flagrante delicto with another woman by his wife and quoting comedian Richard Pryor saying, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? I mean, obviously, Simpson is guilty. There's no question about, sorry, there's no question about Simpson's guilt. I mean, it's just a joke. It's just outrageous that he got away with murder. I don't know what to tell you because I feel positive, about all three of these cases. I don't know what to say.
Okay, well, we are talking about the subject tonight is the Warren Commission, so let's bounce back to that one for a few more questions, please. Here's one. Although you've concluded that the Warren Commission correctly found Oswald to be the sole assassin, did you find any substantial errors in any conclusions of the Commission? And if so, what were they?
Did I find any errors? Well, there were things, some weaknesses, but let me tell you, I'm not criticizing the Warren Commission. They're the granddaddy of all investigations. I genuflect in front of them, and without them, I would not have been able to write reclaiming history, but looking back, there were things they didn't do. The head snapped at the rear. It's not in the Warren Commission. Why? Because they already knew what happened. They had scientific medical evidence that the president was hit twice. Once in the upper right back, exited the throat. The other one, the upper right head, exited the side of his head. So they knew what happened, and they just didn't deal with this issue. Probably one or more of them should have, they all looked at the film, should have said, isn't that strange that the head is going backwards? But they didn't deal with the neuromuscular reaction. They didn't deal with a lot of possible conspiracy theories that they perhaps should have, but they did an excellent job. I mean, I'm an extremely critical person. Interestingly enough, I'm not a cynical person. My late mother and my sister, one of whom died, said that I think the word naive. I'm very naive. But when I see something, then I become extremely critical. I mean, I'd find fault with the beautiful morning sunrise. So when I tell you that I think the Warren Commission did a very good job, it carries a certain amount of weight because I'm an extremely critical person.
Well, Mr. Bugliosi, unfortunately, we reached the point in the program where there's time for just one last question.
The one that I can't answer.
Oh, I'm sure this is one that you'll be able to answer quite easily. And it's about Jack Ruby. Do you have any thoughts on what motivated Jack Ruby?
Well, you know, the statement always made is that, and you've heard it, Ruby silenced Oswald for the mob. Now, what does that really mean? That means that Oswald must have killed Kennedy for the mob, because if not, why did they have to silence him? And there's no evidence that the mob was behind the assassination, no evidence that Oswald had any connection with organized crime. As far as Jack Ruby is concerned, the FBI and the Warren Commission investigated him very, very thoroughly, found no evidence that he was a member of organized crime. Jack, everyone call him Jack, he liked to intimate that he had mob connections, and he'd wear a fedora hat like Al Capone. He was from Chicago, and he did meet, undoubtedly, some low-level mobsters at the two clubs that he owned, one of which was a girly club, the Carousel, which was almost his whole life. But there's no evidence he was a member of organized crime. By the way, Jack Ruby volunteered, wanted to take a polygraph test, and passed it. Now, passing the test is not conclusive, but I can tell you as a former prosecutor that wanting to take the test is very significant, because that's circumstantial evidence of innocence. I mean, he's just a layperson. He doesn't know how accurate it is, and he was demanding a polygraph test, and he took the test and he passed it on that issue. Also, like Oswald, he'd be a terrible, terrible hitman, because he was many of you probably don't know, but Jack Ruby was very, very close to Dallas law enforcement. He loved the police. He'd hang out at the police department. He had many friends in Dallas law enforcement. They said he knew over half of the members of Dallas law enforcement. Just before he shot Oswald, one of the detectives said, "Jack, you son of a whatever." So he's very close to Dallas law enforcement. Many of them came to the club at night. Not the type of guy you'd want to commit the second biggest murder in American history for you, who's so close to Dallas law enforcement. He also was a blabbermouth, couldn't keep a secret. He was snitching all the time. At the club, if there were people that he thought were maybe involved in criminal activity, he'd snitch on them to the Dallas Police Department. Again, the type of guy that organized crime would go to. I'm being sarcastic, as you know. What else can I say about Ruby? Very, very emotionally and mentally unbalanced, violent temper. A nice guy. People liked him, but they'd be talking to him, and all of a sudden he'd haul off and hit them, and they wouldn't know what they had said that caused him to hit them, and then he'd throw them down the stairs, and then he'd forget about it 5 minutes later. He had organic brain damage, 7 dogs, 6 of whom he called his children, the 7th his wife. That was Sheba, the wife. Jack Revelle was the detective in charge of the Criminal Investigation Division of the Dallas Police Department, and Jack Revelle testified before the House Select Committee on Assassination. He said, "Listen, Jack Ruby is a buffoon. He said, and I say this to this committee, if Jack Ruby was a member of organized crime, then the personnel director of organized crime should be replaced. Now, why did he do it? Why did he do it? Incidentally, isn't it very illuminating that everyone that knew Ruby, and the FBI interviewed hundreds of people. He's a guy around town. If there was a fire, Jack Ruby was there. I mean, he was everywhere around town. Everyone they talked to, without exception, thought it was a joke that this guy was a big mobster and silenced Oswald for the mob. Those are the people that knew him. But young people in Dubuque, Iowa, or whatever it is, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, on their, whatever they call the screen, I don't know, I don't have a computer, but the internet, who never met Jack Ruby, they're convinced that he was this big-time Dallas mobster. He was the mafia's representative in Dallas. Jack couldn't cross the street on a green light without help. And, I mean, he was just a guy that was, the needle wasn't quite pointing north. I mean, he's a nice guy, but, I mean, he just, anyway, why did he do it? And then, I guess, we're out of time. Jack Ruby idolized President Kennedy. His psychiatrist used the word, and he wasn't using it lightly like, love you, mean it, not that way. He loved John F. Kennedy, loved him, and took his death very, very, very hard, cried throughout the assassination weekend. Ruby's sister Eva used to live in L.A., and I would talk to her from time to time. She's since died, and she told me directly. She said, when the president died, she said, my brother Jack, these are almost his exact words, cried harder than when Ma and Pa died. And I think that Ruby's hatred for Oswald and his love for Kennedy played a role in his motivation for killing Oswald. But there's a second reason involved here. There's a lot of evidence to support it. Jack thought he was going to become a big hero as a result of this. Big hero. Those who knew him very well said, Jack thought he was going to become a hero. The prosecutor of Ruby, I just saw him in Dallas Thursday, and I've gotten to know him quite well, who was going to prosecute Oswald if Ruby hadn't killed him first. Bill Alexander said, oh yeah, Jack thought he was going to become a hero. Several members of the jury who convicted him of murdering Oswald said that Jack thought he was going to become a hero. And several people that knew him told the FBI that, yeah, Jack thought he was going to become a hero. We do know that he tried to get an agent. He thought there was going to be a big book and a movie about him for his heroic deed. His first lawyer said that Jack, never even thought he was going to be punished. There was all this hatred against Oswald. And then Jack steps forward, vigilante justice, and shoots and kills Oswald. And he thought that he said he was going to just get a slap on the wrist, and in due time he'd be back at the Carousel Club, greeting people from all over the world, coming to shake the hand of the man who killed the president. And by the way, he did get congratulatory telegrams from people all over the world saying, you're our hero, thank you for doing what you did, we wouldn't have had the guts, but you're a great man, and all that stuff. So I think the combination of hatred and his wanting to become a hero are responsible. Okay. Apparently we've run out of time. I want to thank you for coming here very much tonight, and I wish all of you the very best of luck in all the years ahead. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Our thanks to Vincent Bugliosi, prominent criminal trial attorney and author of the famed Helter Skelter and the new book, Reclaiming History. We thank our audiences here and on the radio. I'm Joe Epstein, and now this meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, celebrating more than a century of enlightened discussion, is adjourned.